Hi, Belleruth Napperstack here. I'm a clinical social worker, the founder of Health Journeys, an audio company. We publish meditation, guided imagery, hypnosis, etc. And we are coming up on our 30th year doing this, which is shocking to even hear out loud, but it's true. We got this company started. Well, the first story, which everybody's been asking me for, everybody's been asking for stories about the start of this company. It started, I think, sometime around 1986 when I was making audios for various patients in my private practice, just to speed them along on their various journeys towards self-realization. And sometime around 86 or 87, a woman that I'm going to call Bonnie, even though that's not her name, but she booked an appointment with my practice, and she was looking for help with fighting stage 4 breast cancer and gearing up for a rigorous course of chemotherapy. Now, her metastases had spread into her bones and her lungs, possibly her brain, and she'd been told by a well-meaning friend, misinformed but well-meaning, that maybe she got sick because she'd been too passive and she needed to take a more proactive stance if she wanted to get better from this cancer. Now, don't even get me started on certain simplistic tropes, pseudo-psychological wisdom, one-dimensional theories on how people get sick and what makes them well, because we're very complicated beings, and that simple stuff really doesn't work. And it sometimes makes me crazy, but that's another story. But the very idea that this Bonnie was passive was just plain hilarious. She was one of the most assertive, directive, demanding, take no prisoners humans I've ever met in my life. And I don't know what this friend of hers was thinking, but she got away with this behavior. It was pretty outrageous because she was also warm, generous, kind, loyal, charismatic, funny, and lots of fun to be with. So I got a huge kick out of Barney. Anyway, she heard that I had made an individualized audio cassette tape for her very best friend, who was a client of mine, and she was using it to boost her progress in therapy, as most of the clients who did this in my practice were doing. I was in the middle of this huge recording spree, making individualized hypnotic guided imagery tapes free for any client who wanted one. I'd been inspired by some courses I had taken with 3 Ericksonian hypnosis practitioners. They were inspired lunatics. Their names I still remember were Charlie Citronbaum, Bill Cohen, and Mark King. And the course was at Shepherd Pratt in Baltimore. And I got very excited about just the interesting take this had on how to change human behavior. It was very paradoxical and counterintuitive and pretty brilliant. So I got very intrigued in seeing what this kind of recording could do in shortening treatment time, lessening frustration, and boosting the speed of a person's change. So I would make these cassette tapes at my kitchen table in the wee hours of the morning before the phone would start ringing, and before my kids got up needing to have their school lunches packed. And so I made them at this kitchen table with these 2 boom boxes, rather crude, but I didn't know any better. And after having made 38 of these cassettes and test driving them with 38 people, I finally stopped because I was certain this technique had merit. And I was now in a position of believing that so strongly, having seen it, that I was willing to go to bat for this technique and make it work someplace. So, but that's background. So Bonnie says she wants this tape for her cancer. I patiently explained to her that I am not qualified to make a tape for cancer. I don't know that much about cancer, and for all I know, I could make something that would hurt her inadvertently. So Miss Passive perks right up and says to me, "So fine, call my oncologist. She'll just tell you to go ahead because she thinks I'm going to die in 4 to 6 months anyway." I countered that I still didn't know how to make a cancer tape, that my skill, if I had a skill, was in making highly personalized, deep dish guided imagery for my psychotherapy patients, whom I knew extremely well and felt qualified to speak to them in this hypnotic way. So Bonnie comes back with, "Don't worry, I'll tell you what to do," which was classic Bonnie. Okay, so I did call her oncologist, and as predicted, this doc assured me that I couldn't make things any worse. No one on the tumor board was exactly taking bets on Bonnie's longevity, and her bottom line was, if she wants a tape, give her a tape. So I stopped worrying, and I let Bonnie tell me what to do. The tape ended up being about 15 minutes long, and it had Bonnie's white blood cells swarming around her cancer lesions and shrinking them. There were also memories Bonnie had from being a little girl, of walking on wet sand at the beach with her much adored father. She remembered her little hand in his big warm hand, hearing the music of the surf and the seagulls, and feeling cool sand squishing between her little cute toes and the waves lapping at her ankles, and just that feeling of being very, very happy to have her dad all to herself. So Bonnie also had a mother. She was less fond of her mother, but her mother was also no slouch in the aggression department, as was Bonnie. She was a ferocious cleaner of things, wielding a noisy vacuum cleaner that was sucking up cancer cells, unlucky enough to cross her path. So she had this image also that she wanted installed on her tape. Ferocious mom cleaning out cancer. Well, she had a few other things in there too. Basically, Bonnie loved her tape. Why wouldn't she? Everything on it was her idea. So she carried her portable tape player everywhere and religiously plugged it in while sitting in the waiting room of the Ireland Cancer Center before and during each and every chemotherapy session. Well, it wasn't long before Bonnie was telling the other patients and staff nurses to listen to her tape. She even created several bootlegs and started handing them out to patients with instructions to do themselves a favor and listen. So for better or worse, I had this rogue point person and PR agent in the hallowed halls of University Hospitals of Cleveland. So Bonnie proceeded to do really well for a really long time, given what her prospects were. Her attitude was upbeat. She was enjoying her life. She was still shopping and lunching with her pals, still bossing everybody around, just as she'd always done. And she seemed to sail through a pretty rigorous course of chemo with little or no discomfort. One exception being when she lost her hair, she really was thrown for a loop briefly. And some of her tumors were in fact shrinking, while others were being held at bay, far beyond her oncologist's expectations. It was kind of cool. She also seemed to be pain-free, which was really strange to a lot of professionals who felt that given what was going on in her bones, she should have been in pain, but didn't seem to be. Well, as a result of Bonnie's extravagant ad hoc promotional skills. A nurse on the infusion unit asked me to make a general tape for anxious people in the waiting room, where they had to wait for their blood work to come back before they could qualify for the upcoming chemo that they didn't want anyway, but were scared not to get. So the waiting room was not exactly a stress-free zone, you could say. So, being as how I was going to be making this tape for a whole bunch of people, most of whom I did not know, I studied all the research I could find at the time. And there was some. It was crude because it was at the very beginning, but there was some solid stuff from Gene Ochterberg, Frank Lawless, Karen Olness, Howard Hall, David Spiegel, Candace Pert. And I caught up on what I thought leading lights had to say about guided imagery for cancer. People like Stephanie and Carl Simonton, Larry Leshan, Barbara Dossi, Louise Hay, Michael Samuels, Shakti Gawain, Marty Rossman, and David Bressler. I really studied. I also interviewed oncologists, oncology nurses. I interviewed patients, what it felt like emotionally and physically to be dealing with this, and their families, what it was like psychologically, emotionally, and physically to be dealing with this. So, did a lot of homework. And because an important goal was to alleviate anxiety and have the listener get the benefits of seeing the chemotherapy as an ally, as a friend to team up with, not an enemy to be afraid of, I wound up creating imagery of a beautiful, beneficent fountain of sparkling, healing fluids that magically infused the body and encouraged the body's natural defenses to go desiccate tumors. Other imagery on that tape had symptoms subsiding, person's energy returning, feeling a settled stomach, not feeling too fatigued, and to help combat feelings of helplessness, isolation, and fear, I surrounded the listener with a cheering squad of committed, fill-in-the-blank allies. And I also threw in an imagined future of a healed self doing what mattered most, happily engaged in what gave meaning and purpose to their lives. So the hospital used that tape for years, and it became the basis for our very first Health Journeys guided imagery audio tape for chemotherapy that still exists today in slightly better, a lot better produced form and with more embellishments that were scientifically based. And Bonnie stayed alive and full of sass and vinegar with astonishing quality of life for 2.5 years. Now, of course, I am not saying it was because of the guided imagery. She was a remarkable character, and I have no idea what combination of magical ingredients from her character and her drive and her inner strength and her sheer exuberance, what all contributed to her lasting 5 times longer than predicted. But I do think that the imagery that she created for herself played a part. And I even think her promotional efforts, her drive to get this into the ears of everybody, whether they wanted it or not, I think that contributed too, gave her a sense of purpose and meaning, and she was going to shape up everybody in that waiting room. Interestingly, sadly, her downturn coincided with some traumatic family events, after which she quickly slipped into a coma from a rapidly growing metastasis to her brain. It was as if her magnificent spirit took a look around at her new tragic circumstances and said, "We're getting out of here." And get out of here she did. So I have to give all credit and thanks to Bonnie for getting me started on a whole different adventure that I had no plans of doing. And I smile to this day when I think about her because I owe her a lot. And she made a difference to a lot of lives. Anyway, respect, Bonnie. Thank you.